सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्. At the outset, I would like to extend my grateful thanks to the organizers of the Chinmaya International Foundation for giving me this opportunity to share some of my thoughts on the text Vedanta Paribhasa with you all, a scholarly audience and also seekers of truth. And with a prayer in Siddhanta Lesha Sangraha of Appaya Dikshita, I would like to begin my lecture. The invocatory verse in Siddhanta Lesha Sangraha of Appaya Dikshita runs like this: Adhigata Bida Purvacharyan Upetya Sahasrada Saridiva Mahibedan Samprapya Shauri Padodgata Jayati Bhagavat Pada Shriman Mukhambuja Nirgata Janana Harani Suktihi Brahmadvayeka Parayana. So freely rendered in English, it means, just as the Ganges, which has emanated from the feet of Lord Vishnu, has reached in various tributaries to all the places, in the same way, Janana Harani Suktihi, the Sukti, Niravadyam Bhashyam, which has emanated from the lotus-like face of Sri Shankara, has reached the hands of so many preceptors, Advaitic preceptors, to be interpreted in different ways. But the culminating point being Brahmadvayeka Parayana, all of them profess only the non-dual Brahman. So, the basic tenets of Advaita, all the writers professing the Advaita Vedanta, they agree in the fundamental principles that Brahman alone is Brahman alone is ultimately real, and it is none other than the individual self or jiva, and the indeterminable Maya or Avidya is responsible for making Brahman appear as the phenomenal world. And the world that is given in perception is illusory, like the silver that appears in a shell. Nevertheless, the world that is given in appearance is practically efficient, and knowledge alone is the sole means to liberation. And when it comes to developing these doctrines, the Advaitic writers, either for meeting the objections of the critics or for explaining their own tenets for their followers, the Advaitic writers show considerable originality. And when we read the Advaitic text, it gives us a feeling that there is the doctrinal differences within the field of Advaita. It gives us a feeling that there is more than one school in Advaita. However, these basic differences do not in any way jeopardize the basic commitment of the Advaitins to the basic principles. In other words, the Advaitic writers, they preferred to have they wanted to have preferences but no exclusions. For example, the basic maxim that Brahman alone is real, Brahma Satyam, Jagan Mithya, Jivo Brahmaiva Naparaha, this maxim all of them followed. But in regard to the subtle details as to the nature of Jiva, Ishvara, all these things, the Advaitic writers, they had differences of opinion. The core remains to be the same, while in the periphery, it changed. And in doing so, the Advaitic writers, they differed, and we have a sloka of Sureshwara, Yaya Bhavet Pumsam Vyutpattif Pratyagatmani Sa Saiva Prakriya Gneya Sadhvi Sacha Anavastita. So with regard to the details of understanding the nature of the world, nature of Jiva, Ishvara, whatever be the mode of intellect the disciple could follow, the Advaitic writers, they interpreted and they gave us so many views. Yaya yaya bhavet pumsam vyutpattihi pratyagatmani sasaiva prakriya gneya, and these modes of interpretations differ vastly, but the core remains to be the same. Now with this background, I would like to make a beginning of the text Vedanta Paribhasa. The word Vedanta, you all know, the end portion of the Vedas, that is the Upanishads are known as Vedanta, and Paribhasa means technical terms. In order to understand the Vedantic text, one has to know what are all the terms used in that particular system, whether it be Nyaya school or Sankhya or Purva Mimamsa, whatever be the school of Indian philosophy, one has to know the technical terms used in a particular system of Indian philosophy. So also, if one has to embark upon the study of Vedanta, one has to know the technical language or the technical terms involved in a particular system. So with this end in view, Dharmaraja Adhvarindra of the 17th century, who was an younger contemporary of Appaya Dikshita, who was a logician himself, who was a Navyanayayika, incorporating all the Navyanyaya terms, he has given us the text called Vedanta Paribhasa. You all might have heard about a text called Advaita Siddhi, written by Madhusudana Saraswati of West Bengal. If you look into the text, the very first wording of the text begins with Avachedaka, Avachinna, frightening terms of the Navyanyaya. One need not get afraid of these terms, because if one knows the technique in which the words have been used, there cannot be a precise language than Navyanyaya language to understand the concepts of Advaita. So also, our author Dharmaraja Adhvarindra has used the technical terms, or has used the technique of Navyanyaya language in order to make us understand the paribhashas or the technical terms used in Advaita Vedanta. Now the methodology of the text goes like this. Any school must deal with two main aspects, that is, one is the metaphysics and the other one is the epistemology, how knowledge arises, that is the theory of knowledge. So what Dharmaraja Adhvarindra does is, first of all, he deals with the entire means of knowing the object, that is the theory of knowledge, all the pramanas. He first explains all the pramanas, and next comes the Vishaya, and the last one is the Prayojana. Now what is the Vishaya? For Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, what is the Vishaya? What is the content of Advaita Vedanta? In a very simple manner, if we want to say, Ajñātam Brahma Shastra Vishayaha Jñātam Sat Tat Prayojanam. So Brahman, the pure consciousness, which is veiled by ignorance or avidya, that is the content of Vedanta. And when Brahman is intuitively experienced by the removal of ignorance, then that the same Brahman becomes the Prayojana, or the fruit of inquiry. So Ajñātam Brahma Shastra Vishayaha Jñātam Sat Tat Prayojanam. Now, in order to know this Brahman, which is the Vishaya, what are the means of knowing? So, in order to understand what are the means of knowing? So, Dharmaraja Adhvarindra, Dharmaraja gives what are the means of knowing Brahman. So, he gives scope for the entire pramanas in the first portion of the text. Now, strictly speaking, what could be the real means of knowing Brahman? It is only the Upanishadic text. Because there is an Upanishadic text which says, Tam tu Aupanishadam Purusham Prichami. That Brahman, I ask about that Brahman, which could be known only from the Upanishadic text. Now, where is the need for other pramanas? Because Brahman could be known only from the Upanishadic text. So, absolutely there is no need for the other pramanas. So why has Dharmaraja, why has he given all the other pramanas? He should have given only Upanishad or Agama as the pramana. Where is the need for the other pramana? This question may arise. But we have to understand that the Upanishadic texts speak of Brahman as the most immediate object, that is, it could be intuitively experienced. There is the Brihadaranyaka text which speaks of Brahman as Yat Sakshat Aparoksham Brahma. Yat Sakshat Aparokshat Brahma. The word Aparokshat means that Brahman which is most immediate, because that supreme self which is termed Brahman is identical with the inner self. So Pratyaksha Chaitanya. So that is the most immediate than any other object in the world. So in order to know what is meant by immediacy, immediacy of object. For example, we see a pot on the floor. You are experiencing that object. There is Pratyaksha. Now this is an object which is Vyavahita or which is present elsewhere. It is not immediate. You have only Paroksha Jnana or immediate knowledge. Whereas an object which is directly in contact with your sense organs, that is said to be immediate. But think of Brahman, who is the most immediate object, because that supreme Brahman or pure consciousness is identical with your own inner self. So that is the most immediate object which could be intuitively known. So Yat Sakshat Aparokshat Brahma Aparoksham Brahma. So in order to know as to what is meant by immediacy, the Advaitic writers feel that one has to know what is meant by how perception helps to have intuitive experience of Brahman and what is the scope and nature of perception. So in order to explain us the scope of perception, Pratyaksha Pariccheda, Pratyaksha is given the prominent place. And not only that, when we come across the different philosophical systems, in Indian philosophical systems, Pratyaksham ekam charvakam. Charvakas admit only Pratyaksha as pramana. And Vaisheshikas admit Pratyaksha and Anumana. And Pratyaksha, Anumana and Agama, Sankhya school admits 3 pramanas. And Nayayikas add one more to it, Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana and Agama. So 4 pramanas. And the Prabhakara school of Mimamsas, they add Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Agama and Arthapatti or presumption is added as the 5th pramana. Now the Kumarila school of, the Bhatta school of Mimamsakas add one more to it, that is the 6th pramana, Anupalabdhi or non-apprehension also as a pramana. Now the Advaita school, Vyavahare Bhattanayaha, there is a maxim, whatever in the worldly transactions, in the empirical transactions, they follow whatever is admitted by the Kumarila school of Bhatta school of Mimamsakas. So also the Advaitins admit 6 pramanas. Now, as far as perception is concerned, we have just now explained how perception is helpful in understanding the immediacy of object. So perception is being discussed first. Now, what is the nature of Anumana Pramana? Why Anumana should be accepted? The Advaitins, everything apart from Brahman is false or illusory for the Advaitins. Brahman alone is real for them. Sadeva Saumya idam agra asit ekameva advitiyam Brahma. This is the Chandogya text. It says ekameva advitiyam Brahman alone is non-dual. Brahman alone is real. There is no second entity apart from Brahman. So even if we feel that there is a world given in perception apart from Brahman, it does not impair the non-dual nature of Brahman, because the world is not real like Brahman. So any entity which exists apart from Brahman would be contradictory, provided if that also is real like Brahman. But a non-real world or an unreal world or an illusory world will not anyway impair the non-dual nature of Brahman. So that alone is real. Now, how do the Advaitins prove the non-real nature or the indeterminable nature or the illusory nature of the world on the basis of inference? There is an inference, Brahma Binnam Sarvam Mithya, Brahma Binnatvat. Whatever that exists apart from Brahman is Mithya. The word Mithya, which is a synonym of Anirvachaniya or illusoriness. So this speaks of this inferential cognition, proves that Brahman is not, the world is not real and it is illusory or indeterminable. So Brahma Binnam Sarvam Mithya Brahma Binnatvat. So on the basis of the pramana called inference or anumana, the Advaitins prove the falsity or the illusory nature of the world. And what about Upamana Pramana? Upamana Pramana or comparison for the Advaitins, the Upamana Pramana gives us the knowledge that something is similar to something and something is dissimilar to another object. Now, in the case of Brahman, extending this Upamana Pramana, we try to understand that Brahman is like nothing and unlike everything. So, Upamana Pramana gives us the knowledge that Brahman is like nothing and unlike everything. And the fourth Pramana, that is Agama Pramana, is strict in the strict sense of the term. It is the Pramana, it forms the Murdhanya Sthana, it is the Pramana Raja, it is in the strict sense of the term, can be called as the Pramana to understand Brahman. And the last one, that is non-apprehension, I'll come to Arthapati later on. Non-apprehension, that is a silver shell is perceived as silver at a particular point of time. On further analysis, one comes to the conclusion that it is not silver, that it is only a piece of shell. So, an object which existed in a particular place is proved later on that it does not exist in the same place. So, the absence as well as the presence as well as the absence of a particular object is present in one and the same substratum. This we are able to ascertain in the case of shell silver. Now, extending this line of argument in the case of Brahman also, Brahman and the world, if at all it exists in Brahman, because there are two sets of Upanishadic texts which speak of acosmic and the cosmic nature of Brahman. One set of the Upanishadic texts speak that the corporeal and non-corporeal elements, all Dvevava Brahmanorupam Murtam Chaiva Amurtam Cha. If at all objects are present, the worldly objects are present, they are present in Brahman. The Upanishad hastens to add Atata Adesho Neti Neti, and in that Brahman also it does not really exist. So, if we are able to ascertain the absence of a particular entity in a substratum where it appears to exist, then that object is proved to be false or illusory. So, in the case of shell silver, silver which existed in shell is proved to be, on further analysis, is proved to be non-real or illusory at a later date because of the sublating cognition that it is not silver, it is only a piece of shell. In the same way, the Upanishadic text says that the world, if at all it could exist, it exists in Brahman, and it hastens to add that it does not really exist in Brahman, and this proves the falsity or the illusory nature of the world. So, in this way, all the Pramanas, Arthapate will explain later on, all these Pramanas in one way or the other help us to understand the in totality, all the other concepts of, or how to understand the non-dual nature of Brahman. So the Pramanas, even though the Upanishads alone can serve strictly as the Pramana to know Brahman, all the other Pramanas, although they bear the semblance of Pramana, yet in the Vyavaharika Dasha, in the phenomenal transaction, they are helpful in understanding the nature of the world. So, all the Pramanas have been explained in the theory of knowledge. So, Dharmaraja Adhvarindra takes us, or he gives us a scope of all the Pramanas in the first part of the text, and then Pramananam Pramanyam, he explains the Pramanya or the validity of the Pramanas in Pariccheda and Prayojana Pariccheda. This is the methodology of the text Dharmaraja Adhvarindra gives. Now, to begin with the Pratyaksha Pariccheda, we have the Mangala sloka. You all must have studied why the Mangala is necessary at all, because the Nayayikas have taught us, in order to have a successful completion of the text, Mangala sloka or invocatory verse is very much needed in a text. So, Vignadvamsa Dwara Mangalam Samaptim Pratikaranam, it gives us a successful completion of the text by the removal of impediments that come in the way of the text. But in the case of, say for example, Shankara has begun his Sutra Bhashya with the prolegomena to the metaphysics of Advaita, that is, he begins the Adhyasa Bhashya. It says, Yushmadasmat Pratyaya Gocharayoho Vishaya Vishinoho. There is no Mangala shloka at all. But you see, Atato Brahma Jignasa, the very first sutra. So the word Atha itself serves the purpose of Mangala, and Yushmadasmat, it speaks of the Pratyak Chaitanya and the supreme consciousness. That itself serves the purpose of a Mangala. So we have to explain it that way. But later on, the Prakarana Granthas, as we call, this is in Shankara's Bhashya and all, you don't have such Mangala Shloka, but in Prakarana Granthas, Prakarana Granthas means there is a definition of Prakarana Granthas, Shastraika Desha Sambaddham, Shastra Karyantare Sthitam, Ahu Prakaranam Nama, Grantha Bedo Vipashitaha. Prakarana means those Granthas, those texts which speak of all the subtle details. In order to know Brahman, all the subtle details which contribute to the understanding of the non-dual nature of Brahman, such texts which speak of such details are termed Ahu Prakaranam Nama Grantha Bedo Shastraika Desha Sambaddham. What is the final purport of all Shastras? It is, they are all oriented towards the summum bonum of the life, that is moksha or liberation. So all the texts will speak of moksha or liberation. But how to attain that moksha, the inner details. Shastraika Desha Sambaddham. Shastra Karyantara is moksha. And Shastraika Desha Sambaddham means they will speak of, and it is not the case that all the texts will speak of all the details. There are some texts which highlight only particular points. There are some texts which will not go into some other details. So one has to read many texts related to Advaita in order to know all the subtle details. So such Prakarana, one such Prakarana Grantha is Dharmaraja's Vedanta Paribhasa. So we begin with the perception, the first Pariccheda, Pratyaksha Pariccheda. We have already said that Mangala Shloka has been composed to have the successful completion of the text. The first shloka is Yadavidya Vilasena Bhuta Bhautika Srishtayaha Tam Naumi Paramatmanam Sachidananda Vigraham. So you see this very first shloka, as I told you in the beginning itself, there is the doctrinal differences within the fold of Advaita gives us the notion that there is more than one school in Advaita. Of course, there are many traditions in Advaita, the two important traditions being the Vivarana tradition, of which the promulgator of the Vivarana tradition is Prakashatmayati, and the Bhamati tradition, that is the direct commentator on Shankara's Bhashya, that is Vachaspati Mishra, that is Bhamati tradition. These two are the main streams or the main traditions in Advaita. And when you look into the later Prakarana Granthas, you can easily identify whether one is a follower of Vivarana or a follower of Bhamati, because these two are the main streams by which you can identify an author as to whether he follows Vivarana or the Bhamati. Of course, in certain principles, one will seemingly appear as following Vivarana, but he will have his own view in a particular point of expression. So we cannot totally say that, for example, Anubhuti Swarupacharya, there is an author. He seems to follow Vivarana tradition, but in some details, he has his own views. So, basically speaking, these two are the main traditions in Advaita, Vivarana and Bhamati. So also, when we look into Vedanta Paribhasa, there are so many places or so many points of view which we can easily identify as he is a follower of Vivarana tradition, and his own teacher, Nrsimha Ashrama, he is a follower of Vivarana tradition who has written the text called Advaita Deepika. So also Dharmaraja follows the Vivarana tradition, and we will have glimpses of such views when we come across such views in Pratyaksha Pariccheda. I will be explaining it later on. So the first shloka says Yadavidya Vilasena Bhuta Bhautika Srishtayaha Tam Naumi Paramatmanam Sachidananda Vigraham. If you had studied Vishaya Paricheda, you would have studied there are two definitions of Brahman, Swarupa Lakshana and Tatastha Lakshana. Swarupa Lakshana is essential nature of Brahman, and Tatastha Lakshana means adventitious feature. For example, I define Prithvi. How do you define Prithvi? The Nayayikas define Prithvi as one possessing smell or odor. So Gandhavatvam Prithivyaha Lakshanam. Now this is a feature, it is an adventitious feature which comes to be associated with Prithvi only at a given point of time. So you can even think of Gandha as, at least in the Nyaya school, you can think of Prithvi as devoid of Gandha or smell. So this is a feature Yaval Lakshakalam Anavasthitatve Sati Yadvyavartakam Tadeva. This is the definition he gives for Tatastha Lakshana. That is a feature which does not pertain to the object defined at all points of time. That is said to be Tatastha Lakshana. Whereas the Swarupa Lakshana, or the essential nature of an object, will not at any point of time deviate, or will not at any point of time that the object defined will not be devoid of such a feature. That is said to be the essential. That forms the essential nature. That forms the constituent nature of the particular object. So, in the case of Brahman, Swarupa Lakshana, what is the Swarupa Lakshana? Sat, Chit and Ananda. That goes to make up the concept of Brahman. You cannot think of Brahman. You cannot have the notion of Brahman stripped of any one of these features. Truth, consciousness and bliss. These three form the essential nature of Brahman. Means Brahman is a constituent, is a mass made up of these three constituents, that is truth, consciousness and bliss. And stripped of any one of these features, you cannot understand the notion of Brahman at all. Now, if these three go to make up the concept of Brahman, then a feature or a defining feature is such that wherein you understand that something is a Lakshya Padartha, or the object defined, and something exists in it through some relation. So, for example, Goho Sasnavatvam Lakshanam. If you say that a cow is that which possesses a dewlap, means cow is there, dewlap is present. You are able to understand the defining feature as different from the object defined. But in the case of Swarupa Lakshana, how are we to understand? But the very feature goes to make up the concept of Brahman. But in ordinary experience, we have understood the definition as a feature which exists in the object defined. So, Dharmaraja says, although strictly speaking, there is no difference between the object defined and the defining feature in the case of the Swarupa Lakshana, yet we have to fancy or conceive a difference between the object defined and the definition rather. So, Sat, Chit and Ananda, Anando Vishayanubhavaha Nityatvam Cheti Santi Dharmaha. For this sake, he quotes a text from Panchapadika, Anando Vishayanubhavaha Nityatvam Cheti Santi Dharmaha Apritaktvepi Chaitanyat. Although they are not different from the Chaitanya or consciousness, yet Apritaktvepi Chaitanyat Pritagiva Avabhasante. We have to understand as though they are different from Brahman, as though there is a kind of attribute and substance relationship between Brahman and these features. Really speaking, there is no such difference at all, because it is the essential nature of Brahman. Now, how does Vedanta Dharmaraja define Brahman in the Mangala sloka? Tam naumi paramatmanam Satchidananda Vigraham. The second half of the second line speaks of the essential nature of Brahman, Satchidananda Vigraham. Satchidananda Vigraham means Brahman whose essential nature is Sat, Chit and Ananda. Tam naumi paramatmanam. I prostrate or I worship or I salute that paramatmanam, supreme self, who is of the nature of Sat, Chit and Ananda. And what does the first line say? Yad avina bhuta bhautika srishtayaha. So the first line speaks of the Tatastha Lakshana of Brahman. Now, how does Brahman appear as the world of phenomenal existence? Yad avidya virasena. Now, Brahman, the pure consciousness, is veiled by avidya. There cannot be any relation between these two, because Brahman is self-luminous consciousness and avidya is total darkness. There cannot be, because they are mutually opposed to each other. Light and darkness are mutually opposed. If there exists light, there cannot be any darkness. If there is darkness, there cannot be any light. So, although they are mutually opposed to each other, yet because of some anirvachaniya sambandha, there is the relation of tamah prakashavat viruddha swabhavaha. Although they are mutually opposed, yet there is a relation. That is what Shankara says. Nobody wants this Chaitanya to get related to ignorance at all. But what are we to do? Such a relation exists. We can only obliterate such an such a relation, we have to find out the way how to get rid of this ignorance. That lies in our hands. We cannot ask why such a relation, how that such a relation came into existence, because it is anadi kala. So there is the relation of ignorance to the pure consciousness, and how to get rid of this ignorance, that only we have to find out the solution. Now yad avidya, now so there is the relation of there is the relation of avidya or ignorance to the pure consciousness. Now this pure consciousness, yad avidya vilasina, means this pure consciousness is the adhisthana or the substratum of ignorance. And why does Brahman appear as the world? It is due to the parinama or the transformation of the avidya that is present in Brahman, that Brahman appears as the world. So in Vishaya Pariccheda it is explained what is the even in Vedanta, Pratyaksha Pariccheda, we come across this concept. What gives rise to the world of appearance? It is what is the cause of the world appearance? The Advaitins say that avidya is the cause of the world appearance, and Advaitins make a distinction of the twofold causes. One is there are twofold causes, upadana karana and nimitta karana. There should be one efficient cause and there is a material cause also. Now what is the material cause? Brahman is the material cause. Brahman is the upadana karana, and Brahman is also the efficient cause, he says. So in the aphorism prakritischa pratignya dishtanta anuparodat, Shankara says under that Brahman is also the upadana karana, not only the efficient cause, he is also the material cause. But within the fold of material cause also, the Advaitins make a twofold distinction. One is the transformative material cause and the other is the transfigurative material cause. Now what is the transformative material cause? That material, that entity which actually undergoes transformation in the form of the world objects, that is said to be the transformative material cause. In Sanskrit you call it as parinamyupadana karana. So in the case of the world appearance, the avidya or the maya which is located in Brahman actually undergoes modification in the form of the worldly objects. Mayam tu prakritim vidyat, mayinam tu maheshwaram. There is a text which speaks of maya as the mayam tu prakritim vidyat. No maya to be the material cause of the world. So maya is the material cause because that actually undergoes modification in the form of the objects. Now what causes this maya to undergo modification in the world objects? Unlike the Sankhya school, which speaks of the Sankhya's also speak of Prakriti or Pradhana as evolving in the objects of the world. But in the case of the Sankhya school, Prakriti, which is insentient, it undergoes modification of its own accord without being guided by a sentient principle. But the Advaitins, Shankara in his Sutra Bhashya says, Tadadinatvad artavat. There is the sutra, the Bhashya on this sutra, Shankara says, Yadi vayam swatantram kanchit jagataha prag avastam abhyupagacchema prasanjayet tada pradhana karanavadaha. If we subscribe to the view that the pradhana, just as the pradhana or the prakriti of the Sankhya school, in the same way our maya also undergoes transformation without being guided by a sentient principle, then we would have subscribed to the view of Sankhya school. Parameshwara adhinatu yam asmabhihi pragavastha. But the Advaitins are so cautious in saying Parameshwara tad adhinatvad artavat. Artavati hi sa maya. Parameshwara adhinatu yam asmabhihi pragavastha. The pragavastha or the cause of the world which we speak of is dependent on Parameshwara. Parameshwara adhinatu yam asmabhihi. It is being guided by a sentient principle, whether it is Ishvara or Brahman, whatever it be, it is being guided by a sentient principle. So by being the locus of Maya or Avidya, whose transformation is the world, this Brahman also is figuratively spoken of as the cause of the world. So it is referred to as Vivartopadana Karana, that is the transfigurative material cause. In the Vishaya Pariccheda, Dharmaraja says, Parinamamana Maya adhishtanatvam va vivartatvam. What is meant by transfiguration? Parinamamana Maya adhishtanatvam. By being the substratum of Maya, whose transformation is the world, Brahman is metaphorically or figuratively spoken of as the cause. This constitutes Vivartopadanatva or transfigurative material causality in the case of Brahman. Now, why I am telling you all this? This has got the exact relevance with the first line of the Mangala shloka, Yad avidya vilasena bhuta bhautika srittika. This is what is precisely explained in the first line of the Mangala shloka. Yad avidya yasya brahmanaha avidyayaha vilasena. Vilasa means parinamena. So, avidya has undergone modification in the form of the worldly object. And whose avidya is it? The avidya which is located in Brahman, and Brahman is the transfigurative material cause, vivartopadana. So, upadanatva or the causality in Brahman, that constitutes the tatastha lakshana of Brahman, because there is a point of time, sadeva saumya idam agra asit ekameva advitiyam Brahma, where Brahman remains even without any causality. So, this causality or upadanatva is only an adventitious feature that is present in Brahman. So, Brahman, the upadana karanatva, that is not an essential nature of Brahman. In the second line, we speak of the essential nature. In the first line, we speak of the upadana karanatva, which is the tatastha lakshana. And how is to what does Brahman the upadana karana? Bhuta bhautika srishtaya. So, srishtaya means the plural conveys the sense of srishti, sthiti and laya. In the sutra Janmadhyasya yataha, we have the Vishaya Vakya. The Taittiriya Upanishad text says, Yato va imani bhutani jayante, yena jatani jivanti, yat prayanti abhisambhishanti, tad vijignyasasva, tad brahma. Yato va imani bhutani jayante, from which all these beings arise, and yena jatani jivanti, in which they derive sustenance and manifestation, satta spurtyadikam labante, and yat prayanti abhisambhishanti, yena tadatmyam gachanti, and into which they lapse back at the time of dissolution, know that to be Brahman. So, this is the Vishaya Vakya of the second sutra, Janmadhyasya yataha, wherein it is stated that Brahman is the upadana karana or the material cause of the world. So, bhuta bhautika srishteha. So, srishti, sthiti, laya, for all these, Brahman is the material cause. So, viewed in the light of all these factors, the very first line of the Mangala shloka speaks of the upadana karanatva of Brahman, which is the tatastha lakshana, and the second line, Satchidananda Vigraham, this speaks of the essential nature of, that is the Swarupa lakshana of Brahman. Tam Naumi Paramatmanam, that is the supreme principle, that supreme Brahman. I prostrate, I pay my salutations to that supreme Brahman. This is, so far is the Mangala shloka. Would you like to have any kind of questions or queries or any doubts cleared, or I will proceed further? Should I proceed? If there is no response, that means you all have understood that I will proceed. Okay. Yeah, I want such feedback. Okay. Then I skip off all the other shlokas which relate to the details of Dharmaraja. Now, first he begins with, pardon? Are you able to hear me? Okay. Now, in the beginning he says, what are the four? There are, to read any particular text, there is what is known as Anubandha chatustaya. Have you all heard of this Anubandha chatustaya? What are the Anubandha chatustaya? Can anyone tell me? Sambandha and Prayojana. Adhikari, Vishaya, Sambandha and Prayojana. So, who is the fit person? Who is the Adhikari to embark upon the study of Vedanta? He is considered to be the Adhikari. And what is the Vishaya? Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampannaha, he is the Adhikari. Vishaya, what is the content of the text? And Sambandha, what is the relation between the text and the Vishaya? Pratipadya Pratipadaka Bhava Sambandha. And then Prayojana, what is the fruit of inquiry? As we have explained earlier, as far as Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta is concerned, we have told there are only two maxims, that is Ajñātam Brahma Shastra Vishayaha, Jñātam Sat Tat Prayojanam. Brahman, which is concealed by ignorance, that is the content of Vedanta. And free from the veil of ignorance, the same Brahman, to remain as Brahman, that becomes the fruit of inquiry. That is Jñātam Sat Tadeva Prayojanam. So Adhikari, Vishaya, Sambandha and Prayojanam. Now, Dharmaraja begins by saying, what are the four Purusharthas? Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha. These are the four Purusharthas. Now, he says, in relation to Moksha, the other three are not, Moksha alone is the Parama Purushartha. Now, what constitutes Paramatva in respect of Moksha? Because it speaks of, at least in Advaita Vedanta, it is considered to be Parama Purushartha because it speaks of the relation of the inner self with the Supreme Self. So, Tasya Nityatva Avagamat. In the system of Advaita, if one attains Brahman or if one attains this Parama Purushartha, one becomes Brahman. There is no question of being born again. So, one experiences Brahman. To remain as Brahman, this constitutes moksha or liberation. So, when compared to the other three, Dharma, Artha and Kama, the fruits of Dharma, Artha and Kama, they are all considered to be not real, non-real. So, he says, Tad yata iha karmachito lokaha kshiyate, evameva amutra punyachito lokaha kshiyate. Just as by the performance or exhaustion of the karma, you exhaust all the you exhaust all the fruits of karma. Karmachito loka, the loka or the world that is being obtained by the performance of karma comes to an end. In the same way, kshine punye martyalokam vishanti. After you exhaust all the merits that you have acquired, there is a time, even if you go to Swargaloka, somebody will ask you, okay, your point of time, you have to be born again, you have to vacate this place. So, kshine punye martyalokam vishanti, one has to be born again. So, tad yata iha karmachito lokaha kshiyate, evameva amutra punyachito lokaha. The loka or the world that is obtained by the performance or by the acquisition of merit also will come to an end. So, the fruits of Dharma, Artha and Kama are transient or non-eternal when compared to the Parama Purushartha, that is the supreme bliss, that is the attainment of supreme Brahman, that is the Parama Purushartha. So, because it is the Parama Purushartha, how are we to attain such a Parama Purushartha? In order to know Brahma tat pramanam, Brahma tad jnanam tat pramanamcha saprapancham nirupyate. So, he makes an assertion or there is a propositional statement. Dharmaraja says, in order that one may attain that Parama Purushartha, I explain what is Brahman, how to acquire the knowledge of Brahman. Knowledge of Brahman is the sole means to liberation. This is Advaita. Knowledge of Brahman is the sole means to liberation. Now, before going further, you have to bear one thing in mind. According to Advaita, the knowledge of Brahman which arises from the Vedanta Vichara, knowledge of Brahman arises. And that removes ignorance. By the removal of ignorance, one remains as Brahman, which is liberation. So, the Advaitins make a distinction between two kinds of knowledge, that is knowledge of Brahman and Brahman as knowledge. One has to understand the distinction between these two. Knowledge of Brahman and Brahman as knowledge. This is called, in Sanskrit, it is called vritti jnana, and this is swarupa jnana. Okay, so there by the study of the Vedantic texts or Vedanta Vichara, one has the knowledge of Brahman, that is called Vritti Jnana. There is Brahmakara Manovritti. By the study of Vedanta, one has the knowledge of Brahman. And knowledge of Brahman removes the ignorance concealing Brahman or pure consciousness. And when all other factors contributing to the rise of the knowledge are present, then one gets liberated or one remains as Brahman. So to remain as Brahman, Niratishaya Ananda Swarupam, Brahma, that constitutes liberation. So this is Brahman as knowledge, that is called Swarupa Jnana. Now this Swarupa Jnana is eternal, whereas this Vritti Jnana is not eternal. Should not think, why knowledge of Brahman, how can it be called non-eternal? The Advaitins, see, Brahman as knowledge is eternal, but knowledge of Brahman, which gives rise to, please bear in mind, knowledge of Brahman which contributes to the removal of ignorance, that also is characterized as mithya. Till the time it gives rise to the knowledge or removal of ignorance, it has its purpose. But once there arises or one realizes Brahman, then this knowledge of Brahman also is of no use. This is also considered to be mithya, because if we admit this also as eternal, then there will be two entities which are real, and that will be against the spirit of Advaita, because there can be only one entity which is real. Is it clear? So, knowledge of Brahman by the removal of ignorance gives rise to liberation, that is Brahman as knowledge, which is called Swarupa Jnana. So, Brahma Tadjnanam. How do we arrive at the knowledge of Brahman? Because all cannot remain as Brahman instantaneously. There is so much of, Shankara says in his Viveka Chodamani, the second shloka of Viveka Chodamani says, Jantunam Narajanma Durlabam Ataf Pumstvam Tato Viprata. See the progressive stages. Jantunam Narajanma Durlabam Ataf Pumstvam Tato Viprata. Tasmad Vaidiga Dharma Marga Parata Vidvatvam Asmat Param Atma Anatma Vivechanam Swanubhavaha Brahmatmana Samstitihi Muktir. This is Mukti. Swanubhavaha Brahmatmana, to remain as Brahman, that is Muktihi. Muktirno Shatakoti Janma Sukritir Punnir Vinalabhyate. It requires innumerable previous births. One must have acquired merits in the innumerable previous births to reach progressively this stage of liberation, Brahmatmana Samstitihi. So, Dharmaraja makes an assertion, Brahma, what is Brahman? I will say, Tadjnanam. Tadjnanam means how to acquire that knowledge of Brahman. Tat Pramanam, what are the means of knowing that Brahman? We have explained already what are the, how do the Pramanas contribute to the knowledge of Brahman, all the Pramanas. So, Brahma, Tadjnanam, Tat Pramanam cha, Saprapancham Nirupyate. Saprapancham means, the word Prapancha means Vistarena Saprapancham in all its entirety, details. I am going to explain, he says. So, we will go till 3:30, isn't it? 5 more minutes are there. Okay. So, Saprapancham Nirupyate. Now, to begin with, what is meant by a Pramana? A general definition of a Pramana, Pramakaranam Pramanam, that which gives rise to valid knowledge, that is Pramana. What is meant by a Pramana? That is a general definition given by any school of thought. Pramakaranam Pramanam. Pramana is that which gives rise to valid knowledge or Prama. Pramakaranam Pramanam. Tatra Pramakaranam Pramanam. Now, what are the Pramanas? We have listed 6 Pramanas: Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Agama, Arthapatti and Anupalabdhi. So, there are these 6 Pramanas. Now, we have to go one by one. What is Pratyaksha Prama? Pratyaksha Pramana, he says, Tatra Pratyaksha Pramakaranam Pratyaksha Pramanam. What is Pratyaksha Pramana? That which gives rise to valid perceptual knowledge is termed Pratyaksha Pramana. So, in order to understand Pratyaksha Pramana, first of all, we must understand what is meant by Pratyaksha Pramana. What is valid knowledge? Without understanding what is valid knowledge, one cannot understand, because it is a relative term. Because one has to understand Pramana means one has to know what is meant by valid knowledge. So he gives, Dharmaraja gives the definition of valid knowledge. Anadigata abhaditartha vishayaka jnanam prama. What is meant by valid knowledge? Valid knowledge according to Advaita is anadigata abhaditartha vishayaka jnanam prama. Should I write it in English or Devanagari is okay? Anadigata. For the sake of clarity, I just make a split here. Anadigata, abhadita, artha vishayaka, jnanam prama. So what is prama or valid knowledge? Let us go from the back. Artha vishayaka jnanam. Any knowledge must refer to a content, isn't it? I have the knowledge of something. If I say I have knowledge, immediately you will put me the question of what? Because knowledge is a relative term. It must always refer to a content. Nirvishayaka jnanasya aprasiddhatvat. You can, contentless cognition is a contradiction in terms. So, if you ask, if you say that you have knowledge, knowledge of what? So, artha vishayaka jnanam prama. Prama or valid knowledge which has something as its content, something X as its content. Let us not think about what object. Artha means an object. Artha vishayaka jnanam prama. So, prama or valid knowledge is one which has for its content an object. Now, there are two adjectives given for this artha or the object. One is anadigata and the other is abhadita. The first one is anadigata, second one is abhadita. How should be the object? The object of valid knowledge should not be sublated at a later date. Consider the example of shell silver. You perceive at 3:30 because of dim light or defective sense organ, you perceive a piece of shell as silver at 3:30. But somebody comes and instructs you, or you yourself realize that it is not a piece of silver, only shell at 3:35. Now, between 3:30 and 35, these 5 minutes you have been experiencing it as silver. At the 35th minute, you have come to know that it is only shell and not silver. Now, till such time, you have had the sublating cognition that appeared as silver and that happened to be valid. Till such time, there arose this badha or sublation. But once the badha or sublation has taken place, then that object ceases to exist there. No more, silver no more exists there. Now you perceive it only as shell. So, in the cases of erroneous cognition, there is badha or sublation. So, when there is, in the cases of cognition, where the object gets sublated, you come to realize that the object of the knowledge does not really exist there. So, you consider or you conclude that it is not a valid cognition, it is only an erroneous cognition. Now, how do you come to understand or how do you come to the conclusion that it is erroneous? Only because of the sublating cognition. Till there arises the sublating cognition, nobody thinks that it is erroneous. So long you perceive the world to be real, it continues to be real. For all of us here, it is real for all practical purposes. But in the case of a jnani who has realized this world to be only an appearance of Brahman, he will no more perceive it as to be real. So, till there arises the sublating cognition, that object would continue to be valid. So, what does he insist? Prama or valid knowledge is that which has an artha or object, which is abhadita, which will remain without getting sublated. So, it is for certain that the object of valid knowledge should never get, if you perceive pot, for example, in ordinary experience, pot should always appear as pot and not otherwise, isn't it? So, whoever sees it as an object, whoever sees it should perceive it as pot. When I perceive it as pot, somebody says that it is only a cloth, then it is not correct. All of us should have the universal experience that it is a pot. So, there is no sublating cognition in the case of the object which is related to the valid knowledge. So, it is an abhadita artha. That object is abhadita artha. That is one important point. It should not get sublated. Now, the second one is anadhigata abhaditartha visheka. The object of valid knowledge should be anadhigata. Anadhigata means, in simple English, if we say adhigata means that which is known. Anadhigata means that which is not known. Okay. Say, for example, at 3:30, I am perceiving, let us consider that I am perceiving this is a pot and I am seeing this pot for the first time in my life. Let us consider like this. So, it is anadhigata. I have not seen this object earlier. I am seeing it for the first time and I come to know, I am just giving the name pot and I am knowing it for the first time. It is anadhigata. An object unknown hitherto. Anadhigata means which is unknown hitherto, which has not been known earlier. This is the in strict sense of the term. Anadhigata refers to an object which is not known earlier. Okay. Now, the object of valid knowledge should not get sublated at a later date. Not only that, it must be an object which is unknown hitherto, which has not been known earlier also. Okay. Such should be the state of the object which is the which is the object of valid knowledge. Now, there arises a question. Yesterday I have seen a pot and I have had for the first time and I have had the valid knowledge of pot. Okay, it is valid. Now, I am seeing this also. Is it not valid? And I am saying, giving the expression this is pot. Is it valid or not? Now, the question would remain to be, it is not anadhigata because yesterday I have known that pot and I am seeing the same pot today. So, it is adhigata. It is adhigata, already it is known to me. Now, how could you characterize? In that case, there are so many objects which we come across in our daily experience. That means for the first time only you can consider that knowledge of the object to be valid. In the second and subsequent cognitions, you cannot treat it as valid. So, in order to treat those cognitions as valid, the word anadhigata must be understood in a restrictive sense. As far as the Advaitin is concerned, anadhigata means adhigata, anadhigata, avidyaya, avritatvam, that is that which is concealed by ignorance. Shall I finish this concept alone and then conclude the class? Okay. Now, this leads us to the basic position of Advaita. Now, what happens in the case of the ordinary experience of, say for example, a pot? According to Advaita, every object, pot, cloth, etc., is superimposed upon the pure consciousness Now, the substratal principle is Brahman, the pure consciousness. So, all objects are superimposed starting from a blade of grass and ending with Hiranyagarbha. All objects are superimposed upon pure consciousness or Brahman. or the underlying reality, underlying principle, the substratal principle of all objects, according to Advaita, is Brahman, the pure consciousness. Now what happens is, when you don't have the sense contact of objects, so the objects, this pure consciousness, which is the underlying reality of pot, it is technically known as consciousness conditioned by pot or consciousness conditioned by the object. In Sanskrit, it is called Vishaya Chaitanya. Now what happens is, when my sense of sight, let me explain the process as to how there arises the knowledge of pot. When my sense of sight comes into contact with the object pot, what happens is, my mind, which is luminous, which can travel, my mind which is luminous by nature, when there is sense contact, my mind comes out through the particular sense organ. When it is to hear something, it will go through the auditory sense. When it has to perceive something, it will go through the sense of sight. When it has to smell something, it will go through the olfactory sense. So respective sense organ, it will travel, mind will travel. It will reach the place of the object and it will undergo modification in the form of that object. Okay. Now the basic position we have explained. Pot is superimposed upon the consciousness conditioned by pot. Strictly speaking, if somebody asks you the question, there is a pot on the table, where is the pot? If you are an Advaitin, you have to answer, pot is located in the consciousness conditioned by pot, because the basic position of Advaita, every object is superimposed upon the consciousness conditioned by it. This is the Advaitin's position, because all objects have for their underlying reality the substratal principle Brahman, the pure consciousness. So in the case, what happens is, when there is no sense contact of pot, what happens is, this Brahman, the pure consciousness, which is the underlying reality, it is being concealed by ignorance, because we have already said, when there is no contact, all objects, Vishaya Chaitanya, all the Vishaya Chaitanya, they are being concealed by what is known as ignorance, which in Sanskrit we call as modal ignorance or Tula Vidya. This is the basic position. When there is no sense contact, there are so many objects in the world of which we have no contact at all. They exist. But once the object comes into contact, I have the contact of some particular object, then what happens is, I am so attentive. Sometimes you may be looking at an object, but your mind may not travel, because there is a lot of difference between looking and seeing. Looking means it involves mind also. Seeing means just like that casually you are seeing when you are walking on the road, you are seeing so many objects, but not all objects are recorded in your mind. When you are attentive, when your mind reaches the place of the object and comprehends what it is, then only you have the knowledge of the object. So we are speaking of such a situation where my sense organ my mind has gone out through my sense of sight and it has reached the place of pot. I am so attentive and it has reached the place of pot and it has assumed modification in the form of that pot. This mental modification or the antakarana parinama is technically called vritti or mental modification. It is called antakarana vritti. Manovritti or antakarana vritti. Now what does it do? The main function of this vritti is to remove the modal ignorance concealing the object conditioned consciousness. This is the role played by the vritti in all cases of perception. Unless and otherwise this ignorance is removed, you cannot have the manifestation of the object, because pot is an insentient object, jada padartha. It cannot manifest on its own. So it must have a principle which could reveal it. But what happens is, unfortunately, the object conditioned consciousness also is veiled by modal ignorance. So unless that veil of ignorance is removed, you cannot have the manifestation or the cognition of pot. So when in all cases of cognition, what happens is, where the sense organ comes into direct contact with the object, the mind which has undergone modification in the form of that particular object, unless and otherwise the mental modification is there, there is no question of the cognition of that object. Because as I said earlier, you see so many cars going on the road, so many buses. If somebody puts you the question, what bus did you see the bus? No, I saw some bus going, but I did not notice what number it was, because you are not attentive, your mind has not reached the place. So the role of mind is so important in order to have the cognition of the object. So that mind goes and it reaches the place of the object, and it has assumed modification in the form of that object in order to remove the modal ignorance, or what is known as Tula Vidya. Now what happens is, it is similar to a situation where in a bare wall, the face cannot get reflected. But in the same wall, if you place a mirror, it reflects the face. In the same way, the pure consciousness, because it is the substratal principle of an insentient object, Jada Padartha, that is pot, there is no manifestation of consciousness. Consciousness, because it is being veiled by ignorance, that ignorance should be removed. Now what is the factor that would remove ignorance? That vritti, or the mental modification, removes the ignorance. When that ignorance is removed, what happens is, in the vritti or the mental modification in the form of pot, the pure consciousness, that is the underlying principle or the object conditioned consciousness, gets reflected in the mental mood in the form of pot. So, or the pot, the vritti in the form of pot, receives the reflection of the consciousness in it, and this is what is precisely known as the cognition of pot. So the mental modification inspired by the reflection of the consciousness in it, that is what is referred to as the cognition, empirical cognition of pot, or I am Gataha. Now why I am explaining you all this is, every time you are looking at an object, you're looking at an object, this process goes on and on. And when you are continuously looking at an object, you have the cognition for 10 minutes, you have that cognition. But once your sense organ ceases to have any relation with the object, then you see some other object, immediately that object conditioned consciousness again gets veiled by ignorance. So as and when the mental modification comes, that ignorance is removed. So when the relation of sense organ ceases to, when the relation ceases to exist, immediately the object conditioned consciousness gets, or it is being veiled by ignorance. So every time you have the cognition of the object, this process of avidya getting removed by the mental state takes place. So in this sense, you have to understand the word anadigata means, yesterday I have seen the pot. There has been mental modification in the form of pot through the operation of the sense organ. So it had become adigata. All this process has taken place. But once the relation of my sense organ ceases to exist with that object, I see some other object, the object, that cognition arises. So long there is the contact of sense organ with the object, there is relation, there is the removal of avidya. But once you cease to have any relation with the object, then immediately the object conditioned consciousness is veiled by ignorance. So every time you see the object, it is anadigata. Adigata means the veil of, anadigata means in this sense, avidyaya avritatvam, that is the object conditioned consciousness is being veiled by avidyaya avritatvam, means that which is concealed by ignorance. So when there is the mental state in the form of particular object, that veil is removed. But once the relation ceases to exist, again the object conditioned consciousness gets concealed by avidya. So in this process, every day when you have the knowledge of the object, what is required is, there should be the removal of ignorance by the mental mode or the mental modification. So in this sense, every object prior to the rise of the cognition of the object can be said to be Anadigata. Anadigata means prior, I have the cognition of this book now. The moment I cease to have any contact with this object, again when I look into the object, it is anadigata only. You have to understand the word anadigata in this strict sense, not in the literal sense of the word anadigata means once which has already been known, then it does not become anadigata, it is adigata only, or should not. In the strict sense of the term, according to Advaitins, anadigata means that which is concealed by ignorance. So every time you look into an object, this process of mental modification takes place, and this object condition, the veil of ignorance should be removed by the mental state in the form of that object. So in this sense, the object of valid knowledge or prama is anadigata. So it is an object which is unknown hitherto. Unknownness consists in being concealed by ignorance. You have to understand it that way. Unknownness consists in being concealed by ignorance, and abadita means which is not sublated at a later date. Tadrisha artha vishayaka jnanam prama. So prama or valid knowledge has for its content an object which is not sublated at a later date and which is unknown hitherto. So pramakaranam, the means of such a prama is known as pramana. I think we should stop here. It is 3:45 now. So thank you for the patient listening.